Hello and welcome to the first midnight readings of the new year. I hope you enjoyed Comic Time as well as the little season 6 thing I did earlier this week. Comic Time will be continuing, maybe once in a while. Today we will be reading The Sun Princess, written by Sky Writer. I hope you enjoy. She had a name for herself. Her name was Faithful Student. This wasn't how the Sun Princess referred to her, of course. The two did not speak in quite the same language. After all, the Sun Princess's actual name for her faithful student was a quick series of low, liquid yowls that were honestly a little difficult to hear at a distance. Sometimes Faithful Student preferred it when the Sun Princess addressed her merely with whistling sharply. The high frequencies carried a little better over the hills. Why had she picked the name Faithful Student? Well, it was at least a little obvious, wasn't it? Faithful Student was exceptionally painfully faithful to her princess. And why be faithful to the Sun Princess particularly? Did Faithful Student need any reason beyond the fact that the Sun Princess was huge and strong and potent and wise beyond all measure? Beyond the fact that the Sun Princess deserved every scrap of her faithfulness? No. But the regular feeding didn't hurt either. So that was the faithful part right there. But what about Student? That one was pretty easy too. After all, there were all sorts of lessons to be learned about the silly old universe that the two of them shared. Don't mark the corner of the laundry room. Good lesson. She had learned that one early. Don't eat an entire half-rotten squirrel and then regurgitate it all over the living room rug. Another fine lesson. Don't bother the smelly little waddling black things with the stripes on their backs. Strictly speaking, the smelly little waddling black thing had taught Faithful Student this message more or less directly, but the Sun Princess's obvious disappointment over the resulting situation, as well as the aggressive series of baths that had followed, really hammered that lesson home. The derivation of the Sun Princess's name was obvious. She was high and warm, and provided good things from above. Plus, to the Faithful Student's eyes, the long hair that spilled from her sensible brown hat was the same colour as the luminous ball overhead. She believed that this could not possibly be a coincidence. Faithful Student had many responsibilities as the Sun Princess's faithful student. When the Sun Princess was feeling happy, it was Faithful Student's content duty to participate in the stick-throwing game that the princess seemed to favour. When the princess was feeling down, it was Faithful Student's solemn charge to lie by her side, nuzzling under her elbow and placing her chin against the princess's side until she felt better. And best of all, when the princess was feeling intuitus, which was almost every day, it was Faithful Student's joy and pleasure to help the Sun Princess move the stupid woolly things from place to place. Because the stupid woolly things were extremely stupid, and would wander all over if he didn't threaten them a little, and put the fear of the princess into them from time to time. One mustn't actually bite them, of course. There was a fine line of deception that Faithful Student had been forced to walk. She accepted it all with boundless joy. This was her duty, and to her duty, perhaps above all, Faithful Student was faithful. Therefore, it came as the greatest of all blows when the Faithful Student found that she could not execute her duty. She had seen the warning signs for several months, joints that didn't spring back to working Tim quite as quickly as they used to, eyes that had, truth to tell, become a little foggy of late, ears that didn't pick up on the little details the way that they should. Faithful Student was, in her own way, dimly aware that this was the natural order of things. Students grow old and grey, while princesses remain young and strong, for, as best as faithful student could tell, forever. She knew that there was no sense in despairing about it, but faithful student despaired nevertheless, not for her own sake, no. Faithful student merely feared that there would come a day when the Sun Princess would whistle for her, and she would not be able to respond. One day, quite out of the blue, faithful student Scott decided that it didn't want to pack food away as nicely as it always had. Sun Princess had responded with a characteristic kindness by giving her food that was extra tasty, and while this worked for a while, and set faithful student's tail to wagging in the process, it didn't work forever, and eventually the day came when she had to heave it all up again. Faithful student expected to be scolded for having violated her carefully learned lessons about making messes in the house, but instead, all she could perceive from the Sun Princess was a short of deepest sadness. Slowly, faithful student Scott began to feel absolutely wrenched. This wasn't the sort of sickness that she remembered from her youth. This was something much different. The Sun Princess eventually took her to see the ambiguous female in the white coat, who lived in a clean, harsh-smelling place. Faithful student was never certain what to make of this one. She alternately petted faithful student and gave her painful pokes and pinches. Faithful student found this to be untrustworthy behaviour, but she did enjoy the petting. Faithful student looked on from the table as the white-coated female and the Sun Princess had a long talk. Eventually the Sun Princess got angry and started barking very loud. Then she started to make choking and howling sounds. The faithful student's uncompromised nose picked up at the distant smell of despair. More than anything, faithful student wanted to get off the shiny table and comfort the Sun Princess, but she really wasn't feeling up to the jump, or even the walk for that matter. At this point, faithful student had pretty much come to the conclusion that the mere fact of leaving the harsh-smelling place wouldn't make her feel any better this time. But she found herself hoping that the beautiful Sun Princess would at least start to perk up. Something in the harsh-smelling place had clearly upset her. It was not faithful student's lucky day. The Sun Princess remained as broken, as black-smelling as ever. Even as the princess took her up to the happiest place that faithful student could ever think of, the sunny field where the Sun Princess had first taught her the stick-throwing game. The field was warm, and the princess-like sun was high overhead, and the field was full of good smells and castle birds. Faithful student idly found herself wishing that she were in a better condition to appreciate these things. But no, even if she had been in perfect health, the Sun Princess was despairing for some reason, and it was faithful student's job to stay by her side. The princess set faithful student down in the sweet-smelling clovery grass in the field, lay her head across student's back, and howled. Moisture dripped down from her big grey eyes, and the deep scent of her sorrow washed over faithful student as the princess spent her sadness into the grass and onto the painful student's shaggy sides. Faithful student wagged her tail, despite the fact that even this small of a gesture made her hurt a little. "Don't worry, Sun Princess," she said. "I'm here. Whatever it is, I will make it all better." She wasn't sure that this was true, but it was another less necessary to say. There was a fine line of deception that faithful student was forced to walk. Time passed, and the tears stopped eventually. The Sun Princess held her faithful student close, as though she never wanted to let go. The warmth of the princess's body felt good to faithful student's aching belly, and gradually she found herself drifting off into sleep, clutched there in the princess's embrace. Sleep was good. Sleep made the pain go away. And then suddenly a thought struck her faithful student. For the first time in her short little life, she began to wonder, what would it be like to go to sleep and not wake up? An impossible concept at first, Faithful Student still had many jobs to do for the Sun Princess, which she would most certainly get right back to as soon as she was back on her game. But what if such a thing were to happen? Something close to dread began clawing at Faithful Student's mind. From a very early age, she had thrown herself, heart and soul, into being the absolute best student she could be. She had taken all the princess's lessons to heart, and even when she had occasionally slipped up like the one mishap with a bag of potatoes, she had always strived to be better herself in the eyes of her perfect, beautiful, ageless teacher. She knew that she was nowhere perfect yet, if one could really go to sleep and never wake up again. If she would, eventually and inevitably, stop being her princess's faithful student, what had been the point of it all? What was the point of all her lessons, all the happy times that she and the princess had shared? What was the point if all of it was going to end like this? The doubt was short-lived. What was the point, she asked. The princess was the point, as she always has. As she always was. The princess would remember all the lessons she had learned. The princess would remember the good times. The princess would remember her. The thought gave Faithful Student a small measure of comfort against the grim aching of her belly, and she gave herself over to sleep, there in her princess's embrace. At least there would always be someone to remember her. At least something in this silly old universe would last forever. That was The Sun Princess, written by Skywriter. I know it's a sad one, but when I read it, I couldn't help but think back to all the pets I've had in my time. Seeing it from the pet's point of view is always an interesting concept. And also the contrast between Twilight and the Faithful Student, and Celestia and Applejack was a good one. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry if it brought you down, I didn't mean to, but it's nice to think that pets could be so faithful to us. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week. Stay brony!